G'day, how you doing? Adam here from Poseidon Racing with another video in this series, which of course is the ultimate beginner's guide to Zed Run. Everything that you need to know going from zero experience, zero horses, to building up your stable, and of course, winning as many races as possible, as soon as possible. Now, leading up to this video, it's all been about fundamentals. It's all been a little bit of information overload, I suppose. Now we get to the fun stuff, where we're going to race our horse. And if you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you have decided to race your unraced horse. That's what we're talking about today, the strategy in racing your unraced horse, okay? Because depending on that strategy and the decisions we make, we can dramatically affect the value of our horses, either to the moon or spiraling, fiery, crashy wreck to the ground and dramatically dropping the price value of our horse, or at least the perceived value of that horse. Now, nothing ever in my videos is financial advice, so not financial advice, just my opinion on how we can strategize our early race schedule to make sure that we maintain a high level of value in our horse, even if our horse is not the greatest horse in the world. Okay, and that's the issue. If our horse is not great, we don't want to just shout to the world by entering some high quality races and our horse ends up being a 50-to-1 underdog. We don't want to tell everyone that straight away. We want to just sort of creep up on it so we can get a good idea of what our horse looks like or the talent that our horse may have potentially before anyone else can see that, and make our horse look as good as possible so that if we do wish to sell it, that it still holds most of the value of what we paid for it, okay? And that's the important thing. If we make some wrong decisions and put it in the wrong races, then all of a sudden we might reveal, hey, this horse kind of sucks and is never going to win much, if anything at all. And then everyone else might know that too, okay? So let's take a look at that early race strategy. Well, in this video, we're looking at, in particular, the strategy for entering our very first race. And then in the next upcoming videos, we'll look at how to strategize for our second, third, and ongoing races. But for this video, we're looking at our very, very first race. Let's switch over full screen and take a look. Here we are on the Zed Run homepage, Zed.Run. I'm assuming if you're watching this video that you already have your first horse. If not, maybe jump back and start the playlist. You can find the link to the full playlist in the description below. Of course, that playlist is the ultimate beginner's guide to Zed Run. Now, you already have your first horse. So if we click on racing, and I'm assuming that it hasn't been raced yet, click on racing and then click events. And we come to this page here. And as we scroll down, you can see we have the event name, okay? At the moment, it doesn't really matter. Horses don't favour any particular event name or country. Okay, if that changes, I will let you know. We've got the location, then we have the event type. Now, when you're entering your very first race, there is only one class you can enter, and that is Griffin class. The Griffin class is for every unraced horse's first race. All right, and then after the Griffin, for race number 2, you will be assigned another class, whether that be class 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1 currently. If we scroll down here, we should be able to find a Griffin or two. There's one there in grey, and it will have a big yellow flag on it that says free. It's free to enter a Griffin, which is great. And even better, there's a $40 prize pot. If we click on this Griffin race, currently you can see there is 0 horses entered out of 12. Depending on where we are, sometimes these Griffins can take a number of hours to fill up. If we're close to breeding or there's just been a release of a whole bunch of new unraced horses, then they'll fill up within minutes. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It might take a while to fill up. Okay, that's got no horses in it, so we won't worry about that one. Let's scroll down and see if there's one that has horses in there. Here we go here, Istanbul Endurance Classic. That looks like a typo to me, or am I pronouncing that wrongly? Griffin. We've got a couple of horses in there. So, all right, so for the very first time that you race your unraced horse, you will be selecting a Griffin race. If we scroll back up to the top, you can also just click on the little tab here, Griffin. That will make life easier, won't it? And you can see which Griffins are available. Now, there's a couple of things to consider here. Normally, the prize pool is roughly around $40 US. You can see one here for $40.10, another one here for $43. So there's a little bit more value in this one. The reason behind that is when the races are seeded into this list, when they are placed in this list, the prize pool is $40 US, but it's based in Ethereum. And if Ethereum goes up, the prize pool will go slightly up. If it goes up in the meantime while this race is being filled to 12. And if it goes down, then you might see a race at like $38. So you could base that, if you wanted to, a little bit on which race you would like to enter. You might like to enter the one that has a little bit more prize money. In this case, this one here, the second one, $43. Now, currently, let's just click on this one, for example, and have a look. You can see it's a Griffin. Okay, that's great. We can enter that as a horse that is unraced. These two horses, you can see the little G next to their name. That means they are in Griffin class and have not been raced yet. You can see distance, 2,600 here. Currently, with an unraced horse, there is no distance preference that we need to be concerned about, so you can just jump in any distance at this point for your Griffin. Once we start to have entered and completed a few races, we'll start to look at those results and that data and then see if we can see if maybe our horse prefers short distance or maybe long distance or mid distance. In the beginning, we really can't tell, so you can go ahead and enter any race. Now, there is one element that could give you a significant advantage to maybe jumping out to a win in your first race. Okay, and this is where the strategy of Griffin racing comes into it. Now, what you might like to do, now you might be desperate to race and you just say, right, this one's got the most horses in it, it's the closest to being filled, I'm just going to click on here and enter my Griffin horse. You can see I've got a couple there. I won't be entering because that one I'm looking after for my friend. And Tom Brady here, I'm keeping unraced to preserve the value in the name as much as possible. Okay? And you would enter your, if you're desperate, just go ahead and enter. If you just want to race and you don't really care about the value of your horse overly, just jump in and race. Because what I'm about to say in the next strategy takes quite a bit of patience. Now, what you can do is you can wait for a Griffin race that looks to be significantly weaker. In other words, although we don't know the talent of any given horse at this particular time, we do know that Z1s, for example, on average, are better than Z10s on average. When they're unraced, we can assume that the Z1 is likely to be better than the Z10. Now, that Z10 absolutely could be significantly better than the Z1, but on average, Z1s are better races than Z10s. Okay, does that make sense? On average, you know, maybe 1 in every 2 Z1s are going to be reasonably good, but on average, maybe 1 in only every 20 or 30 Z10s are going to be reasonably good. Okay, so on average, the Z1s, you want to try and avoid them. So if you see a Griffin that has 7, 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 horses in it, and it's full of Z1s, 2s and 3s, well, you might like to avoid putting your Z10 in there. However, if you find a Griffin race that has 8 or 9 or 10 horses or even 11 horses in it, and it's full of Z8s, 9s, 10s, maybe even has a few bred horses of Z20, 30, 40, 100, then that might be a good race to put your Z10 or even your Z1 into. If you put a Z1 into that, chances are it's going to start the favourite, and if it starts the favourite, then it's a better chance of winning that particular race. And that's what we want to do, because if we can get out to being one of the shorter favoured horses as far as the odds are concerned, I'll show you those in a moment. If we can be one of the favoured horses in our first race and even jump out to a win or a second or a third, then, you know, there is some perceived value in that, and our horse's value might start to creep up. Whereas if we drop our horse in any random Griffin and it's full of, say it's got 5 or 6 Z1s and a couple of Z2s, we might start that race a significant underdog even though our horse is reasonable, but it's coming up against a really hot field. So that kind of strategy takes a lot of patience, but it can be one that pays dividends, particularly if your horse is not the greatest horse. You can sort of get it off to a decent start by getting some favourable odds and also maybe getting an early result. Okay, now results are not everything in your first race. Don't fret if you come 12th in your first race. And I'll explain more when we have a look at the odds. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, when breeding opens, you can also find some really weak Griffins. Okay, because as people start breeding horses, they're breeding some donkeys with some other donkeys, and they might get some Z30s or some Z60s or some Z73s or 84s or whatever. Okay, and those Z84s, on average again, are likely to be significantly weaker than your Z9 or 10. If you've got a Z9 or 10 Genesis that you want to run in a Griffin, then if you wait till when breeding is just absolutely going bananas and pick a race that is full of Z22s and 112s and maybe doesn't have any 1s or 2s, okay, you might be off to a significant advantage to making your horse look really, really good. But it takes a lot of patience, and we've just bought this brand new horse and we want to race, we want to get into the game. But if you're patient enough, you can find that perfect Griffin. But if you just want to race, look, it's not a big deal. I don't have the patience, to be honest. I had a bunch of unraced horses and I was going to wait for breeding, but then breeding kept getting delayed and I just ended up racing them. Okay? So it can be hard to really wait for that. But by the time you watch this video, maybe breeding's open and Griffins are going every 5 minutes, filling up every 5 minutes, and you might just be able to wait half an hour to pick the perfect Griffin. That could be a solution too. Okay, now when we enter and race our Griffin, what we can do, when the race is about 5 minutes to starting time, so let's just say we enter a race, we've entered in there, our horse is now in that Griffin. You'll have a little orange icon here that suggests that you have a horse in that race. And then when it fills to 12 horses, it will go from the events page to the next to run page. Okay, you might have just spotted that little orange icon that flashed and then disappeared on a race that I was entered into. Let me just refresh this page. I don't have any horses currently due to race now, but I had one that went about 5 minutes ago, which was why that icon just flashed up. Are there any Griffins? No. Okay, and if you click this, once your horse's race has 12 in it, and it might take a minute or two to come across to the next to run page, if you then click My Horses Only, you'll see if you've got any horses. Now, if you've been away working or doing this or that, it may have already run, in which case you can click on Results and do the same thing, My Horses Only, and you will see, you know, that race has already run. Click on here. You might choose to watch the 2D or 3D replay rather than straight up just clicking Results. Okay, I like to watch the replay, particularly if it's the first time my horse has run. I like to watch that. Okay, now as I said, don't be overly concerned if your horse comes last in its first race. I mentioned in the previous video, or maybe it was the beginning of this video, that one of my mates just recently got into this game and he bought one horse, and it's a very good horse. But that horse came, I think, 11th or 12th out of 12 in its first race. I said to him, don't worry about that. This horse has good odds. Okay, the odds are really important currently. Now, those odds may well change as we move into the future. And once again, if that is the case, I will do an update video to tell you how to gauge your horse's potential race strength without those odds. Okay, but currently the odds still exist. How do we see those odds and what do they mean? Well, as I said, the results are great. If you get a win, that's great. If you come last, don't stress, because if you've got really nice odds, then that means in the long term, your horse will begin to win races more than likely. If you came last and you've got really bad odds, then it's not time to completely freak out, because maybe that particular race distance that you entered, maybe you entered a long race like this one here. You can see it's a 2200. Maybe you entered a long-ish race, but your horse maybe prefers short races. Now there are some horses that don't really seem to prefer anything at this stage, But in the future, we'll talk about that later, there could be some avenues or angles where those horses might come good. We'll talk about what to do with those horses that look seemingly like they don't prefer anything at all. Now the odds, there are two ways of seeing those odds, or there's probably more than two, but the two I like to use are this website called Zest Play Platform. Now you can Google Zest, Z-E-S-T, Play, P-L-A-Y, platform, and you'll find that on Google, or you can type in this URL, PICS, you can see it here if you zoom in, I guess, PICKS.playwithzest.com. Now generally, when there's a lot of races going, let me refresh that, yeah, you get a screen like this, and you'll only see the races that sort of are about 6 minutes out from running. And if I come back here, and go to next to run, you can see we've got horses that are, 6, 16, going out and out and out, probably going out to several hours sometimes. So when your horse is about 5 minutes out, you can click on one of these races and observe the odds. Take a look at what odds you have. Now, if we look at this race here, which one would I prefer to be my own horse? Let's assume it's a Griffin. It's not a Griffin, but let's assume it was. This was my Griffin. Which horses would I be excited about? Well, this is a very even race, in fact. You can see there's a couple of horses that I'd be somewhat concerned about. This one here, Trustable One at $46. I'd be concerned. But I wouldn't be completely freaking out because it's a 1,000 metre race. This is the shortest race on the schedule. So even at 46 to 1, there is still some hope that this horse might be great in the mid-distance or the long distance. It's a little bit unlikely, to be honest, but it has happened in the past. So don't stress just yet. And then the other horses, what's the favourite? $8.02, Falcon. You can see that one's raced a lot. Okay, and that's how you can tell this is not a Griffin because there's lots of race results in here. $8.02, pretty good. $8.20 is great. $9 is respectable there and there. Okay, let's have a look at another race. Let's click on this one here. Okay, look at this one. $5.90, very, very nice. In a Griffin, look, if you get something under sevens, start to get a little bit excited that you might have a real good horse. Doesn't mean that you definitely do because it might be a weak Griffin. And then we'll talk about in the next video what to do after racing your first Griffin. After we assess the result and assess the odds, we can determine what we should do next. And that's what we'll talk about in the next video. Okay, so you've got Zest Play Platform to check the odds. Okay, you've entered your first Griffin. It's about to run. You can check the odds. If you miss the odds here, you can also come over here to Know Your Horses. There's one of my horses there, but if we go to the home page, Know Your Horses, and we type in, you can see I've got a few horses there. Let's go with one of mine here, Buck Wild. He's a Z2, not a very good Z2 to be honest. So you type in the name of your horse, it will pop up here, and if your horse has been entered in that Griffin and raced, within the last, or at least say 15 or 20 minutes has gone past, it will probably be already up on here in the stats. And you can scroll down. If it's your first race, don't worry too much about all this stuff up here. Just scroll down. We want to see what the odds were and the result was in that first race. And you can see this is my first race for this horse down here. It was a Griffin, G for Griffin. You will probably only have the one race listed here. It was a 1,200 metre race, so very, very short. And Buck Wild was $7.40, which is good, but not great, particularly for a Z2. If you had $7.40 with a Z10, you can be entitled to start getting rather excited. Okay? It still doesn't mean that it's going to be an absolute champion, but you can start having a few dreams and daydreams about maybe this is a good horse. Okay, so we get here and we have a look and we think, okay, Griffin, yeah, this is my first race, $7.40, pretty good. I'm excited, but not ecstatic. Look, if you got $3.50 or $2.80, then hold the phone. We might have something really special. Okay, the lower you got, the better it goes. But in saying that, as I said, if it's $44, then don't stress. We need to try a couple more distances before we completely write this horse off. And then even in the future, we'll talk about that. There could be some angles where your horse is potentially a winner. And we'll talk about that too. We'll talk about what to do with those 40 to 1ers in an upcoming video in this series. Okay, so for this one, $7.40, came 8th. Okay, so didn't get the result, but pretty good odds. And who knows, maybe we can find a few wins with this horse later. Now, I will talk about this in the next video, what we do next. But you can see with this horse, I then went on to put him in a paid race at a longer distance, and he was almost $22, $21.50 there. That's some warning signals for a Z2. That's not great. And given that he was $7.40, which wasn't exceptional in his Griffin short, and then at 2200 he was $22, we're starting to think that this might not be the greatest Z2. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to confirm it too early. That's exactly what we're talking about in the next video. We're talking about how we can manage our horses moving forward to maximize the value and not reveal if our horse is potentially not that great too early. You know, we don't want to go and, for example, put this horse in Class 1. Class 1 is the best. Go and start putting him in Class 1 paid races for $50 or $100 buy-ins, because that's where all the best horses are. And if I put him in there, he's probably $50 odds. You know, and everyone will be like, well, 50 odds, that's terrible. But if I keep the horse down in classes where he looks really good, maybe even some free races, I can get some shorter odds and maybe get some results and potentially make him look even better than what he actually really is. And that is our job as a stable owner, that is our job as a trainer, to try and make our horses better than what, or look better and more appealing than what they actually are, so that we can potentially sell them for, you know, a good price and not lose too much money, or breed them for a decent price as well. Now, you might think that's a little bit deceptive, but that's the job of all horse trainers in real life as well, isn't it? It's your job to select the races where your horse has got the best chance so that it can look the best it possibly can be for stats, for wins, for prize money, and potential future stud breeding. It's our job to make our horses look as good as they are, and if possible, make them look even slightly better than what they are. Okay, that's kind of our job. In the next video, the upcoming video, that's exactly what we're going to look at. What do we do after we've raced our first Griffin with the odds that we have, whether they be great or not so great? What is our next angle of attack? If you love the content, give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy NFT sports-based gaming, then subscribe to the channel. You're going to love it. Other than that, in the playlist below, we've got the link to the full playlist of this series, which of course is the ultimate beginner's guide to Zed Run. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.